Hey everybody, it's another live broadcast. Everybody, same day, record on. Oh, before we see what the record on Friday, August 25th, 2023. So everyone, first off, yep, I'm gonna start from desktop, okay? Got notice from last video. I think I might record audio gameplay. Sorry about that. I didn't know it was. I didn't pay attention. But I am next time. So. Yep, no more rain because I got pictures of one on there. So that you know what? This is. So, you know, get on the computer of Miranda. Picture of Miranda. I got picture of Miranda. That's picture of Miranda on the computer. So, that's Ava, and not Ava. Haley, DJ, Michael Shipman, Lower. I just think you're enough for that. I should test down. That's okay, can turn no boots. Sophie, Sabrina. I know from Selena. And Zerto. Anyways, that's it to show on Instagram. Okay? So, anyways, everybody. Yep, I'm gonna be here for a while. I guess the notepad. I get my bruise out officially. Okay, yeah. And then there will be a 10-year circle. Okay? Because that arts input. Okay? I think so. Yeah. But anyway. There you go. I see that big from there. Okay. Still there. Okay, good. You know that short anyway. Yeah. So, let's go to the computer. It's pretty easy anyway. Facebook, I don't make any notes. Oh, God. See? They're not kept Valentine, but that, you know, from that scene, when there's a problem. So, yeah. That being from Pete Peterson, I don't know. You know? That's it for Facebook. We can go for movies as well, right? I think so. Yep. I'll tell you for next time too. But for now, put it like that, okay? What the code says is here. What is it? Phone separate? I don't know. Oh my, I didn't even know. Okay. And sometimes I call it his train. But all parties shift toward him. Maybe so. Anyway, let's get out right away. So 10 posts. Okay, let's get out. Okay. And yes, I'll clean that up a little bit. That's it. So now, from here, right? Let's hit one back there. And just let me run. Where can they go? But wait, them don't the alphabet. So, hey everybody, and welcome to VoiceCall. It's a Longo stream. Recorded right now, I guess Wednesday, October 2nd, 2018, everyone. Well, and then I got a notepad. Today, Miranda post, and it's got photos of a shirt. It's like a smiley face and star, flies and black coat there. And right now on my feed, I got 275. I remember I had to update my Instagram story, but right now, this last one, Brian did a stream. We talked about what kind of fun we had. Well, I need to update even more than that. Maybe that we go where's just pictures together for certain stuff. That'd be sexy or yeah. With you. Yeah. Then just tear my crit. And there you go. the fish out of Capio. Then they go. Yeah. Right? Oh, just okay. Okay. I'm going to look at the self abuse.
Hey guys. I'm sure many of you already know, but for those who don't, Chuck E. Cheese has been going on a huge remodeling spree, remodeling almost all of their locations. Some people like these remodels, but I have a feeling most people don't, because they removed the animatronic shows that have been with the company since the very beginning. And the animatronic stage is walled over and replaced with a dance floor and TVs. So to sum it up, the entertainment in these remodeled locations is kinda lacking, with really the only notable form of entertainment being the walk-around performances, since now it's the only way to meet Chucky with the animatronic gone. And the games are still there, of course, but they take away a lot of the really fun classic ones with these 2.0 remodels. But something changed recently, something that I need to talk about today. So back in April 2023, the Chuck E. Cheese location in Brooklyn, New York underwent the 2.0 remodel. That doesn't sound like anything out of the ordinary, right? Well, nope. They ended up being the first location in the US to test out the Chuck E. Cheese trampoline zone. For those of you wondering what this is, the Chuck E. Cheese trampoline zone is essentially just a large set of trampolines set up in the game room of a Chuck E. Cheese location. I think Chuck E. Cheese did this due to the rising popularity of trampoline parks in recent years, and they wanted to catch on. While the 2.0 remodel is pretty bland, I do appreciate Chuck E. Cheese adding these trampoline zones, as I think they finally realized the 2.0 remodel on its own is kinda bland. I like how vibrant the Chuck E. Cheese trampoline zones are, consisting of that neon green, yellow, and blue. It's really nice to see because most 2.0 locations have bland gray walls to look at. To go along with this, in more recent installations of the Chuck E. Cheese trampoline zone, we get new artwork featuring all of the characters, well, except Pasquale. The company always seems to do him dirty. Instead of Pasquale, we got a Bella Bunny poster, which is actually her first permanent in-store artwork. Bella Bunny is a character Chuck E. Cheese introduced in 2018, and recently she's slowly been being used more instead of Pasquale, kind of phasing Pasquale out. Especially on the Chuck E. Cheese concert tour, where Bella B was present instead of Pasquale, but that's a topic for another day. While overall, I think the trampoline zone is a great concept for Chuck E. Cheese, there are some flaws I would like to point out. Flaw 1. The height limit is super short for these trampoline zones, measuring at just below 5 feet, which I think is really short and limits a lot of the kids that can play in these things. But I know it's just for safety, since larger kids could hurt smaller children. Flaw number 2, the trampoline zones are sort of lacking, not really having any other features besides being able to jump on them. Most trampoline parks have more entertainment to them, such as foam pits, basketball goals, and much more, and I feel like Chuck E. Cheese could have really used those things. Flaw number 3 is that with the addition of the trampoline zone, there isn't as much room for games, and a lot of them end up getting removed or relocated. That means that as of right now, the trampoline zones will probably only be exclusive to larger locations, although I did see they made a smaller version. And while I'm not really a fan of the current Chuck E. Cheese remodels, I think the trampoline zone may be a step in the right direction, but we'll just have to wait and see. As of right now, the trampoline zones are only featured in 2.0 remodeled locations, and these locations include Brooklyn, New York, Fairfax, Virginia, Herndon, Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, and Dale City, Virginia. And in September 2023, will make its debut at the Kensington, Maryland location when it opens. So, what do you guys think of the new Chuck E. Cheese trampoline zones? Let me know in the comments down below. Personally, it sort of reminds me of the Funhouse concept Chuck E. Cheese tested at a few locations back in the mid-2010s. Like I said earlier, I'm not too happy with the changes Chuck E. Cheese has made in the past few years, but I am happy seeing them trying to improve, so hopefully we can get more stuff like this in the future. The trampoline zone is still in the testing phases right now, so don't expect it to be at your local store anytime soon, although it could happen in the near future. I'm not sure if Trampoline Zone is here to stay at Chuck E. Cheese, however, as many tests they've done in the past few years didn't manage to stick around that long, such as the Laser Challenge, Bumper Cars, and the Funhouse I mentioned earlier. For those of you who made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. We'll store anytime soon. Earlier, I'm not too happy with the changes Chuck E. Chuck E. Cheese's, a popular family destination known for its arcade games, pizza, and lovable mascot characters. Speaking of the mascots, they can be found on artwork inside the locations, animatronics singing up on the stage, physical costume characters, board games, many video games, tons of other merchandise, and even in the company's logo. But something the mascots also appear on pretty often is the company's rides and games. And of course, the ride we'll be talking about today is none other than the Chuck E. Cheese's photo ride. This iconic kids attraction is known by generations and actually has some pretty interesting history that I want to talk about. So without further ado, this is the history of the Chuck E. Cheese's photo ride.
Restaurants versus Chuck E. Cheese's. You can wait for the waitress or play cool games. Wait for their food or eat a pizza. You can wait and wait and wait.
Sure, say Chuck E. Cheese, please.
Yeah, remember Chuck E. Cheese, please. It's the restaurant where a kid can be a kid.
Before we we go over the history of that iconic kiddie ride, let's first go over the history of Chuck E. Cheese's as a whole up to this point in time. The first Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater opened on May 17, 1977 in San Jose, California. It was founded by Nolan Bushnell, who was also a co-founder of the video game company Atari. He wanted a safe place for families to go to enjoy Atari's latest arcade games, and with this, he combined the concept of a restaurant and animatronic entertainment. After the video game crash of 1983, Pizza Time Theater filed for bankruptcy in 1984, and their competitor Showbiz Pizza Place bought them, and the companies merged in 1986. Although the brands themselves remained separate. But that all changed in the early 1990s, when all Showbiz Pizza Place locations were rebranded as Chuck E. Cheese's. And by the mid-1990s, Chuck E. Cheese was trying to find a way to stay relevant to the kids of the 90s, which included adding cooler games and rides. And that's the time period we're at this point in Chuck E. Cheese's history, so let's move on. Sometime in 1994, Chuck E. Cheese's photo ride officially made its debut at Chuck E. Cheese's locations. The ride was created by Amutech, a well-known kiddie ride manufacturer that produced many famous kiddie rides. They produced many other kiddie rides for Chuck E. Cheese, such as the Chuck E. Cheese Kiddie Coaster and the Chuck E. Cheese's Trolley Car. Also, before we talk about the Chuck E. version, I just want to say that Amutech made a generic version of the photo ride that any business could use because it didn't use the Chuck E. Cheese characters or audio. The original version of the ride for some reason featured Chucky in his Pizza Time Theater outfit, featuring his vest and derby hat. This is strange because this design of Chucky had been retired a few years earlier, but I may know why this could have happened. You see, even into the early 1990s, the Pizza Time Theater version of Chucky was still being used on a lot of things, including a lot of merchandise. Maybe when they were designing the ride, the Pizza Time Theater version of Chucky was still his current look, and when they released it, they didn't want to waste money on changing the statues already put on the ride, so they kept the old design. Who knows? However, on the original version of the ride, it featured Chucky in his tuxedo outfit, and the photo ride logo, along with it saying, "The kiddie ride that takes your picture." Anyways, Chucky is sitting in a red car with yellow wheels, and as the ride goes on, the car moves up and down, and the lights flash on the car as well. Inside the car was a set of buttons, and when you pressed the button for a certain character, their lines would read out during the ride. The backside of the car had the classic Chuck E. Cheese's pizza logo. And of course, there's the main gimmick of the ride, the camera that takes your picture. The pictures that came from this ride were actually really good quality, and they were split with a blade in the machine to cut each individual picture, and they were taken similar to the way a Polaroid takes photos. Now, of course, when the ride was happening, there was a special audio that played during the ride, and thankfully, we have this entire audio archived, so I'm going to play it now.
Smile, you're about to have your picture taken. Don't forget to fill up with gas. Can I stick my head out the window? Hi, I'm Chuck E. Cheese. Let's go for a ride.
I'm Helen Penny. You're an excellent driver.
Hey, I'm Mr. Mutt. Let's go get a pizza.
Your picture is now ready.
After hearing these audio recordings, it left me curious and made me really want to find out who the voice actors were in this audio. There's many options for who these actors and actresses could be, but I think I figured it out. The person voicing Chuck E. Cheese on this version of the photo ride is none other than Duncan Brannon, longtime Chuck E. Cheese voice actor from 1993 to 2012 that many fans love. Duncan was easy to figure out because of how recognizable his Chucky voice is, but the other characters weren't as easy. After listening to many Helen voice actresses from around this time, I came to the conclusion that in the original version of the photo ride, Helen was voiced by Carissa McKinney, Helen's voice actress from 1991 to 1994, and then again from 1996 to 2000. As for Mr. Munch, he was another difficult one to figure out, but I came to the conclusion that he was voiced by Doug Teal, Mr. Munch's voice actor from 1994 to 1996. And last but not least, you may be wondering, who voiced Jasper and Pasquale? Well, it actually wasn't two different people, it was one person, and that person was Bob West. He voiced both characters during various points in time, often leaving and returning to the CEC voice actor/actress cast. But he was definitely around at the time of the photo ride's creation. As for the first location that received the Chuck E. Cheese photo ride, I believe it was the Irving, Texas location, as they are known to do multiple tests during the company's lifespan. In an intermission from the September 2000 show, you can actually see Chuck E. Cheese voice actor Duncan Brandon riding the original 1994 version of the Chuck E. Cheese photo ride. As 1995 approached, some changes were made to the photo ride, but nothing major. It was still this version. They just added new signs featuring the new Cool Chuck logo. And on the back of the ride, the Chuck E. Cheese's pizza logo was removed and replaced with a decal that said, "Say Cheese with Chucky," featuring the new logo, along with a sticker that said Chuck E. Cheese or Bust. As for variants of this ride, I've seen some that had the Cool Chuck hat, and even some with a blue version of the Cool Chuck hat, and even one that didn't have the Chucky statue at all, and instead had another seat for another child. An original Chuck E. Cheese photo ride still existed at the Virginia Beach, Virginia Chuck E. Cheese's location by 2022. However, they have since received the 2.0 remodel, and I'm not sure if the ride is still there or not. Someone let me know in the comments. While this ride isn't featured in much Chuck E. Cheese's media, you can actually spot it in the background of some of the animatronic show tapes. Even though the original 1994 Chuck E. Cheese photo ride is now extinct, only a handful were ever made in the first place, because in 1995, a new version would emerge. The classic version, the one the majority of us probably remember. Let's get into it.
Restaurants versus Chuck E. Cheese's. Their food. Chuck E.'s food. Their host. Our host. Their games. Chuck E.'s games. Their prizes. Chuck E.'s prizes. Why go to a boring restaurant when you can go to Chuck E.'s? Next time Mom says, let's eat out. Remember, Chuck E. Cheese, please. The restaurant where a kid could be a kid.
It's safe to say in the mid-90s, Chuck E. Cheese was going through some changes. They were in the middle of an effort to redesign their restaurants to appeal more to the kids of the 90s, and this would have an effect on their kiddie rides as well. So the photo ride we all know and love was born, the Coach Chuck Photo Ride. This version of the photo ride was almost at every location, and it's the one I remember seeing the most. Look, I even still have my photos from this version of the photo ride from when I was younger. The 1995 photo ride doesn't have that many changes from the 1994 version. The only major change is the actual Chucky statue, which obviously has been updated to its newer design from at the time. On this version of the ride, Chucky can be seen wearing a red and green hat with a yellow star on it, a yellow sweater with green stripes and a green circle on the front. And it's hard to find a good picture of this, but I believe the back of the sweater had a star on it. The 1995 version of the ride still moves up and down and lights up like the 1994 version and plays the same audio tapes. But like I said earlier, this is the most well-known version of the ride, as pretty much almost every location featured it, and everyone remembers it fondly. While while the variant of the 1995 Chuck E. Cheese photo ride that I just discussed is the most common and well-known version, there are many other variants that I need to go over. First, some stores had a version that didn't have the star on Chuck E.'s hat. Some stores also featured a yellow hat instead of the normal red hat. Here's a version that doesn't have any green on Chuck E.'s sweater. I even found some versions of the yellow sweater Coach Chuck ride that had a blue hat, which will relate to something I'm about to discuss. Next, we have the red Chuck E. version of the 1995 photo ride, which wasn't near as common as the yellow version, but a good handful of stores had it. If you couldn't tell, this variant of the ride is based on the red version of Coach Chuck E., as opposed to the yellow version featured on the more common version of the ride and featured on the company's logo. This variant of the ride had Chuck E. with a blue hat that said CEC on it in red letters, along with a red and yellow sweater, which again said CEC on it in red letters, although some versions lacked the CEC letters written on the hat and sweater. Next, here's an obscure version I could only find one photo of, but it features the same blue and red hat as the previous photo ride, but instead, Chuck E. has a blue and red sweater to match, with a yellow C on it. I also found this blue sweater version, but it actually features the red hat from earlier, and on the sweater it just has a white circle. But what if I told you there was one more version of this ride, repainted to look like our beloved Avenger Chuck E.? And here it is. I really like this photo ride, although it's sort of weird seeing Avenger Chuck E. on the Coach Chuck photo ride, but I guess that doesn't really matter. It features Chuck E. in his iconic purple and green cap with the yellow C painted on it. And they definitely tried to make his outfit look like Avenger Chuck's, but it is just repainted Coach Chuck E. sweater, so it's just a purple and green sweater with the yellow C and green circle in the middle. And while it may seem like this was a job done by a specific CEC location, multiple locations actually had this photo ride, leading me to believe that this ride was actually produced like this. There's also this even more obscure Avenger Chuck photo ride, repainted from the Coach Chuck version, except it has a very different looking C, and the hat is the blue hat from all the other previous photo rides. As for other variants, some Chuck E.'s had very small eyes. Some Chuck E.'s also had eyes that were very thin and looked more like ovals. And this Chuck E.'s even cross-eyed. Man, they needed to get some more quality control on some of the photo rides. Some Chuck E.'s also were painted a very dark pink color on his ears and snout, while other Chuck E.'s snouts and ears were painted a very pale tan color, almost white. The 1995 photo ride was also featured in many various pieces of Chuck E. Cheese's media. This includes various Chuck E. Cheese animatronic show tapes, Chuck E. Cheese television commercials, and those tabletop advertisement holders that Chuck E. Cheese used to have back in the 90s and 2000s. I even own one of these table advertisements in my Chuck E. Cheese collection, and I have to say it's a really neat piece of Chuck E. Cheese history, considering most of these were just thrown away over the years. I'm lucky one survived. As the 2000s and early 2010s came around, this was still the standard Chuck E. Cheese photo ride being installed in locations. However, this was going to change very soon.
It's Chuck E. Cheese's newest Yum and Fun deal. A delicious one-topping large pizza
That's the yum.
plus 75 tokens
That's the fun.
for $25. No one else offers your family that. Go to ChuckECheese.com and get your coupon for our new one large pizza, 75 tokens, $25 Yum and Fun deal. Only at Chuck E. Cheese's.
In 2012, Chuck E. Cheese decided to retire their classic photo ride and design a new one. And this wasn't just going to be a rehash of the original ride. It was going to be a completely new ride. Chuck E. Cheese revealed their new version of the photo ride. The kiddie ride manufacturer Eunice is responsible for producing this version of the Chuck E. Cheese photo ride. You may know them because they also produced that sorta creepy Chuck E. Cheese train kiddie ride. The blue base on this ride looks pretty similar to the blue base on the original Chuck E.'s photo ride, except this one has checker patterns all over it and features the new Avenger Chucky logo that was being used at the time. And above the Chuck E. Cheese logo, it of course says Photo Ride on the new sign for the ride. There's also these CEC 79 logos all over the car. I'm not sure what this means, but they're there. There's also a new camera that says Take 5 with Chucky and has yellow details. The new ride uses a red and yellow car like the previous rides, except it has a more modern design now. And not only do the lights light up, but the wheels do too. But before I move on, I gotta explain what this is. So pretty much before the Avenger photo ride was finalized, it featured a prototype version of the Avenger Chuck statue. And oh my gosh, it's bad. Chucky has this weird sweater shirt thing on that looks nothing like his Avenger outfit except for the colors. And if you look near his stomach, he's holding something. Pretty sure it's a ball, but a lot of people think this makes Chucky look pregnant, since the ball is the same color as the sweater shirt thing, but this just wasn't the best design choice. And the prototype version of the ride is the version you can see on the Chuck E. Cheese photo ride manual, and you can see he's wearing a hat, so the thing he's holding in his lap isn't his hat, so don't comment that. Luckily, this design flaw was quickly fixed, and they eventually gave Chucky his iconic purple, yellow, and green shirt, along with his backwards hat. They added a new logo featuring Chucky, Helen, Jasper, and Munch on the back and front of the car. The car now has new buttons featuring the Avenger versions of the Chuck E. Cheese characters. While I couldn't find an HD version of the Avenger photo ride audio online, I did record the Avenger audio at the Paducah, Kentucky location since their ride still uses that audio, so I'm going to play that for you guys now.
Get ready. One's about to start. Fasten your seatbelt and please stay seated. Smile and say Chuck E. Cheese. Can I stick my head out the window?
Don't forget to fill up the gas. I'm Mr. Muggs. Let's go get a pizza.
I'm Helen Henny. You are an excellent driver.
Can I stick my head out the window?
Don't forget to fill up the gas. I'm Mr. Muggs. Let's go get a pizza.
Wow, that was fun. Your picture is now ready.
It wasn't hard at all to figure out who voiced the characters on this ride. Duncan Brandon, of course, reprised his role as Chuck E. Cheese. Anna Gray LaBasse voiced Helen Henny. Rob Gotcher voiced Jasper T. Giles. John Bowen voiced Mr. Munch. And Earl Fisher voiced Pasquale the Chef. With the new photo ride, it produced different pictures compared to the previous photo rides. Instead of being good quality photos, these were just printed on regular printer paper, and they weren't the best of quality. The borders on the photos are really nice though, but some locations had a blue border instead of purple. I'm guessing this change was just due to them using a new camera, but I'm not sure. As time went on, the Avenger photo ride would start seeing some changes. As we all know, in 2012, Chuck E. Cheese replaced Avenger Chucky, their longtime mascot, with Rockstar Chucky. This meant the photo ride was going to go through some minor changes. For example, some Avenger photo rides started showing Rockstar branding, which was literally just Avenger Chucky with Rockstar Chucky's head copied and pasted onto it. It looks awful. I don't know whose idea this is, but it just looks very cheap and bad. Some Avenger photo rides even got the Rockstar version of the audio, which I'll go over in the next chapter. This now meant there were tons of variants for the Avenger Chuck E. Cheese photo ride, with some having Avenger branding but the Rockstar audio, and some having Rockstar branding but having the Avenger audio, and some having Rockstar audio and branding, and some having Avenger branding and audio. It's just a big mess. Some other variants include Chucky with yellow painted on his hat instead of green, and some rides lacking the branding on the front of the car. The last major thing to happen with the Avenger Chucky photo rides was in 2019, long after they had been retired, but for some reason they started showing up at newly remodeled Chuck E. Cheese locations. I'm not sure what the reason was for this, but yeah, that happened. But changes were approaching quickly as Rockstar Chucky was taking over. As we all know, in 2012, Rockstar... But the reason was, Rockstar Chucky... and a new As we all know, in 2012, Rockstar Chucky became the new mascot of Chuck E. Cheese. This meant some changes were going to happen, and these changes include the Chuck E. Cheese photo ride. The ride essentially stayed the same, with the same car and base being used. However, the statue on the ride was changed to be like Rockstar Chucky, and a new audio was made for the ride. On this version of the ride, Chuck E. Cheese was voiced by Jared Reddick. Helen Henny was voiced by Caroline Taylor. Jasper T. Giles was voiced by Jeremy Blado. Mr. Munch was voiced by Chris Hill. And Pasquale the Chef was voiced by Earl Fisher. Once again. Like I said earlier, the ride's physical form was mostly the same, reusing that cheap Rockstar branding. Around 2016, the majority of Chuck E. Cheese locations stopped using tokens, so most of the photo rides stopped using tokens as well, and you had to use a play pass to ride the ride. In 2019, Chuck E. Cheese updated the camera system on their rides and made it very nice quality. Well, it isn't the best, but it's way better than what they had before on the paper versions, and there are also many cool decorative borders on the photos. Around 2020 or 2021, a new statue was made for the photo ride. The photo ride itself didn't change, just the statue, and I think it looks a lot better. But most stores chose to keep the original Rockstar statue instead of getting the new one, which is what most stores have today.
Chuck E. Cheese Summer of Fun is a
Chuck E. Cheese in San Jose, California has their original 1995 photo ride on display in a window. I think that's really cool, and it's funny they have a Helen plush sitting in it. I even found this one guy in Iowa who owns the 1995 Chuck E. Cheese photo ride. If you want to own a piece of Chuck E. Cheese photo ride history yourself, occasionally parts from the ride appear on eBay, sometimes even the Chucky statues. Some museums and other businesses have also gotten their hands on the 1995 photo ride. They probably can't actually run it because the audio is copyrighted, but it's still a pretty neat piece of history. Hope you all enjoyed this video. I had a great time researching this topic. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share. And until next time, bye for now.
Team City will help you to get started with continuous integration. For free. Every big thing starts.
Monkey Joe's, known as the place where you can party big and play great, has been a part of many people's lives, but not including me. This popular family entertainment center has so much to offer, from private birthday parties to the arcade games and of course the large inflatables. It's beloved by many who grew up going to it, even if some people say it's a Chuck E. Cheese knockoff. One reason people think that is because of their mascot, Monkey Joe. I mean, who else would it be? This larger-than-life monkey has been with the company since nearly the beginning, entertaining and kind of scaring kids and parents who have encountered him. But what many people don't realize is that Monkey Joe actually has some history. It's not much, but it's still worth talking about. So in this video, I'm going to go over the entire history of Monkey Joe's, talking about the overall character design, the mascot costumes, and a few other things. So without any more monkeying around, this is the history of Monkey Joe's mascots. Before we talk about this partying primate, let me go over the history of the place that he represents, Monkey Joe's. Now, the history of Monkey Joe's isn't really well known and hard to find, but to some monkeying around, this is the history of Monkey Joe's mascots. Before we talk about this partying primate, let me go over the history of the place that he represents, Monkey Joe's. Now, the history of Monkey Joe's isn't really well known and hard to find, but to summarize, Monkey Joe's first opened around August 2004 and opened its first location in Atlanta, Georgia, so it's a pretty recent business. I wasn't able to find out who the founder of Monkey Joe's was, but I do know the business was originally known as Jumpin' Joe's Party and Play Center. It wasn't until the opening of the second location in North Carolina that the name of the company was changed to Monkey Joe's. Why the name change? Well, it's because the same year of the rebrand, the company Raving Brands purchased Joe's, and I'm guessing they thought it would be a wider appeal if the company had a cartoon monkey as the logo. They were kind of right, since Monkey Joe's immediately took off in popularity, and more locations began opening. I also bet Chuck E. Cheese influenced the name change. And that's where our mascot story begins. Now, before I go talking about the mascot costumes, let me first go over the Monkey Joe character and his backstory.
Summers are for monkeying around. With locations in Greenville and Spartanburg, Monkey Joe's will keep kids active, happy, and healthy in the upstate, no matter the weather. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, or call us to learn more.
So around the time of the rebrand from Jumpin' Joe's to Monkey Joe's, the company introduced its brand new mascot, Monkey Joe. Now, I'm not sure if Monkey Joe was actually around before the rebrand. Like, was he the mascot of Jumpin' Joe's? I want to believe that could be the case, but there's no evidence to prove that. But going over his character design, Monkey Joe is a purple monkey wearing some athletic clothing. His fur is a darker purple, while his skin is a lighter purple. His clothing includes a yellow jersey with red details, green shorts, and red and white sneakers. His design absolutely gives off Avenger Chuck E. Cheese vibes. Almost like Monkey Joe is a result of Chuck E. Cheese having a baby with Bonsai Buddy.
Subtractor Nathan Steve.
Interestingly, despite being a monkey, Joe doesn't have a tail. Which brings up a question I have. What kind of monkey is Monkey Joe? Is he even a monkey or an ape? Maybe he's a chimpanzee. Or maybe he's the same monkey species as Curious George, since he's also a monkey without a tail. Tails aside, did you know Monkey Joe's has lore? Well, it ain't much, but we do know Monkey Joe's origin story, and how he came up with the idea of the Family Entertainment Center. It's kinda long, so I'll try and shorten it for you, but without further ado, here's the story of Monkey Joe's. Monkey Joe's story begins on an island named Cocoa Nutty Island. That island is home to many monkeys of different colors and different patterns. The monkey we are focusing on in this video is Joe. Joe was a very active and healthy monkey who loved doing things like surfing, climbing coconut trees, and skateboarding. One day, Joe was climbing the tallest tree on Cocoa Nutty Island when he slipped and fell, but surprisingly, he didn't get hurt. He actually landed on a patch of vines and moss. He then thought, what fun this must be.
As I'm in the midst of applying for residency right now, wish me luck. Grammarly has a Have you considered going solar in Oklahoma but afraid of... the huge price tag attached? Most people don't know this, but almost 100% of homeowners
Chuck E. Cheese's, known as the place where a kid can be a kid, has been a part of nearly everyone's childhood, including me. This popular pizza chain is best known for many things, like pizza and the arcade games. But the one thing that CEC is known most for is their colorful cast of characters, like Chuck E. Cheese himself. However, surprisingly, this video is not about him. Instead, it's about one of the many side characters, that being the country dog, Jasper T. Jowls. This larger-than-life canine has been with the company since the very beginning, appearing in numerous places around each restaurant, whether that is an animatronic, a costumed character, a poster, or merchandise. But what many people may not know is how many different versions of the Jasper character have existed throughout the 45 years he's been around. So in this video, I'm going to go over the entire history of Jasper. going over not just his mascot suits and animatronics, but also his general character design and personality. This is the history of Jasper T. Jowls from Chuck E. Cheese. Before I go over the history of Jasper, I recommend you guys watch my first history video on Chuck E. Cheese first. I go a little more in-depth with the development of CEC there, but if you haven't seen it, then check it out after this video. But for now, let me summarize the events that came before the creation of Jasper, aka the creation of Pizza Time Theater. So the creation of CEC began when Atari founder Nolan Bushnell, who also went on to create Chuck E. Cheese's, bought a quote-unquote coyote costume at the IAAPA Expo. I say coyote in quotations because when he received the costume, it was actually a rat costume, not a coyote. Bushnell rolled with it anyway and themed the restaurant after the rat, and that's when Chuck E. Cheese was born. However, Bushnell didn't just want a pizza restaurant with an arcade. He wanted something more, some entertainment. But what kind of entertainment? Well, he remembered how much he wanted to work for Disney and came up with a great idea. Why not use animatronics? But then came a problem. There was no way Chucky could do a whole show by himself. At least not yet. He needed some friends, or at least some other characters to work off of. I mean, Ronald McDonald has friends, Mickey Mouse has friends, and don't even get me started on the Looney Tunes, so why not Chuck E. Cheese? Enter Gene Landrum, Atari's consumer division president, who had also been made the general manager of Pizza Time Theater. He, alongside Atari advertising firm, Robert Allen Black, came up with a bunch of new characters to go with Chucky. They created an Italian chef named Pasquale, a black and white cat named Krusty, a group of singing birds called the Warblets, and of course, the star of this video, a banjo-playing country dog named Billy Banjo Boggs. Hold on, let me explain. So you're probably confused right now that I didn't call him Jasper. Well, that's because he wasn't named that originally. Yes, Jasper's original name was Billy Banjo Boggs, and it stayed like that all throughout the development of the restaurant. Atari even copyrighted the name, but for unknown reasons towards the restaurant's opening, Billy Banjo Boggs' name was changed to Jasper T. Jowls. The T in Jasper T. Jowls stands for Tennessee, since according to Chuck E. Cheese lore, Jasper was originally from Tennessee. Also, fun fact, there's actually a town in Tennessee named Jasper, and that's actually where his first name came from. And lastly, the jowls part refers to his really droopy looking snout, also called jowls. As for why a country dog was chosen to be one of Chucky's nitwits, there were a few reasons. The main reason being that the company wanted to create a country western character because country music was starting to get popular in the 1970s. As for Jasper being a dog, it's probably because, well, everybody loves dogs. But I think maybe, just maybe, Jasper was based off Goofy. I mean, come on, they're both dogs, they both have very similar personalities, and to top it all off, they're both friends with rodents. Now, it's not confirmed if Jasper was inspired by Goofy, but I want to believe that was the case. Not to mention Jasper's original voice, which I'll talk about later. So with Jasper's character design, personality, and everything else in the development stage done, Jasper was ready to greet everyone at the grand opening of Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater in San Jose on May 17th, 1977. In the next chapter, I will go over Jasper's history in the Pizza Time Theater era, including more info on his character, as well as voices, mascot suits, and animatronics. Don't think I forgot about those.
Are you interested in starting your own faceless YouTube automation channel? But all people do is tell you to go to Fiverr and Upwork and hire people to make rain.
This is the place for you and your friends. This is the place where
later go on to be the first official voice of Chuck E. Cheese, actually voiced all the characters for the demo recordings. And his voice for Jasper sounds nearly identical to Goofy, only being slightly deeper.
Sure, Chucky. This is my latest song, and Chuck is gonna sing it with me.
However, by the time of the first restaurant's opening, Jasper was instead voiced by Scott Pollan, who made Jasper have a higher-pitched voice. He portrayed Jasper as being easily excitable and had a contagious laugh. I wonder if he ever lost his voice doing all that laughing and screaming for Jasper. Of course, Jasper couldn't have just a voice and artwork. He had to be at the restaurant in the flesh. That's right, it's time to talk about the animatronics. So the original Jasper animatronic, like the rest of the Pizza Time players, was made by Harold Goldbranson. He also made the original walk-around costumes, which I will mention a little later. This animatronic was referred to as the Portrait Bot due to him being stuck to the wall of the restaurant with a frame around him. As you can see, the Jasper animatronic was pretty different compared to both the animatronics of today and the 2D artwork. His head is much smaller, and his muzzle is very different and made from latex. Also, he has more clothing, with the inclusion of a blue bandana, and he's actually wearing a shirt which is red. And finally, he has no buck teeth. The bot was also more quote-unquote homemade, since its movements were very simple, and was controlled more like a large puppet. Moving on to the walk-around costume, it's actually unclear on if a Jasper costume was present at the first location. Obviously, Chucky was there, but I don't think any of his friends had costumes just yet. It wouldn't be until the opening of the second Pizza Time Theater in 1978, also in San Jose, known by many as Coozer, where we would get to see our first look at a Jasper T. Giles mascot suit. The first Jasper costume looks very similar to the first animatronic, as the two share many things in common, like how they both look different from the artwork and the inclusion of red shirts. The only difference being the costume sporting a darker brown color and the eyes being darker, although that's probably because that's the mesh for the employee to see out of. I'm curious as to why the robot and costume were so different compared to the artwork. Perhaps it was due to limited materials? I also wonder if the animatronic and costume head used the same snout molds, since Chucky's bot and costume did that. Speaking of Coozer Road, this is also where we would get to see our second Jasper animatronic. This Jasper portrait bot, while definitely more advanced, was still relatively homemade looking, and I'm not sure what's going on with his eyes, but they're kind of creeping me out. This would ultimately be the last homemade animatronic for Jasper, since by the time the next few locations opened, the animatronics switched to the style we know as the Cyberamics, back then known as the Ottoman bots. These guys were notable for being much larger and less realistic. The Jasper Cyberamic was notable for sporting many wrinkles on the face. Also, like the originals before him, this Jasper could not really move his arms due to them being bent so they could hold the banjo. And speaking of the banjo, originally the company used real banjos on Jasper. However, because of how heavy the real banjos were, it caused wear and tear on the animatronics. So CEC reached out to a company called Redacto, I don't know how to pronounce that, and had them make lightweight polyurethane banjos for the Jasper bots. Oh, one more thing. Did you guys know Jasper actually had a pipe? Yep, that's right. It wasn't just Chucky that smoked. Jasper did too. You can actually see a pipe on the original and Ottoman bot. This would be short-lived though. So in the original Pizza Time Theater show tapes, Jasper was of course his derpy, lovable self, but he was oftentimes the butt of the joke, and was made fun of, mostly by Chuck E. Cheese himself. Chuck would always be mean to Jasper. Well, I mean, Chuck was rude to the other characters, but Jasper was the one who got it worse. This would start a running gag where Chucky would refer to Jasper by a very well-known name by now, the Fruitcake Dog. Chuck would even break the fourth wall on multiple occasions, telling the people controlling the animatronics to turn off the Fruitcake Dog.
No, turn off the dog. Please, turn off the fruitcake dog there. The button on the left. The button, hit the button. Ow. That's better.
Later on, when the guest star characters were being introduced, Jasper flirted with all of them, much to the dismay of Chuck.
Here's one thing you need to do before buying anything online. Don't spend another dime on Amazon.
Jasper quickly became a popular character amongst fans of the restaurant. Not as popular as Chucky himself, but still beloved. In later locations, Jasper would be represented on merchandise and wall art, all of it being based on the original character art, and not the animatronics or walkarounds. The prize counters were even named Jasper's General Store, as a nod to our favorite fruitcake dog. Speaking of the walkarounds, by the early 80s, Chuck E. Cheese attended many local events, and sometimes he would bring his friends. Jasper seemed to be the one that came along with Chuck the most, as there's tons of photos of him at different events, from hanging out with Ronald McDonald, to visiting baseball games, to even riding an elephant. In 1983, Pizza Time Theater was struggling, so the company made some changes, and Jasper was a part of them. For example, Jasper's personality was changed. He was made softer, and his wild side was toned down, making his character more versatile in both singing parts and the types of songs he was given, and was overall smarter. Also, Jasper stopped flirting with guest stars since those were retired, and Helen Henny was made a permanent character. Also around this time, Jasper's mascot costumes were standardized, after there was some inconsistency with Jasper's costumes due to limited materials. Some Jasper costumes looked completely different from others. These include things like the color of clothes, or how some Jaspers had eyelids and others didn't. The new Jasper heads were made from, I think, fiberglass or plastic, and the eyes were thicker. Speaking of the costumes, another major costume change occurred around 1982 or 1983, the articulated Jasper.
Once I had this wild idea for a place where you could eat pizza, salads, and sundaes, and play exciting new games, see a show. I'd call it Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater. I just wonder if anyone would come. Now, a little surprise last, you can get a Chuck E. Cheese backpack free when you buy any large pizza and a salad at a participating Pizza Time Theater.
So we all know Chucky had 3. One more thing to come around this time was the infamous Jasper looked, so the company made it in this one commercial featuring it. And like the rest of these costumes, it was never used in any restaurants, just in the commercials. Jasper looked to have the most limited movement out of the 4 articulated walkarounds, as his mouth doesn't appear to move, and the only thing that does move are his ears and his hat. Also, this Jasper has a pretty long neck, but that's probably due to the mechanisms inside the head. It's unknown if more commercials featuring this Jasper were created, or if this was the only one. Most Pizza Time Theater commercials are lost media, so there's no telling. I want to believe there are a few more, since why else would Pizza Time Theater build one if it was only going to be used in one commercial? One more thing to come around. Quickly became a popular character amongst fans of the restaurant.
Cheese's Pizza Time Theater. I just wonder if anyone would come.
Also, Jasper stopped flirting with guest stars since the rest of these costumes, it was never used in. Also,
And when it's time for different teams, amazing.
On the left, the button, hit the button.
This time, Jasper's mascot Christmas special.
Where you can eat pizza, salads, and sundaes, and play exciting new games. See a show.
I want to believe there are a few more, since why else would Pizza Time Theater build one if it was only going to be used in one commercial? this time was the infamous canceled Chuck E. Cheese Christmas special, The Christmas That Almost Wasn't. You see, Nolan Bushnell had recently opened an animation studio called Cadabroscope, and someone had the idea to create a Chuck E. Cheese-themed Christmas special. This special was going to be aired on NBC during Christmas 1983, but something happened that would kill this project: the infamous video game crash of 1983. Since the crash caused a huge effect on Pizza Time Theater, the special was canceled and never released, though all the voice work was done, with Scott Paulin reprising his role as Jasper. In the following year, 1984, Pizza Time Theater was really struggling, largely from the video game crash of 1983. So from all the money lost and the many stores failing and oversaturating the market, Pizza Time Theater made a difficult decision to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in mid-1984. Thankfully, this bankruptcy didn't last too long, as the company was purchased by their popular competitor, Showbiz Pizza Place. The two companies remained separate at first, but beginning around 1986, they merged into one company, Showbiz Pizza Time Incorporated. As for Jasper, he wasn't badly affected. Everything mostly stayed the same with him. Well, other than his voice. I don't know why, but soon after the merger between Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza, they immediately decided to recast all the Pizza Time players' characters to have different voices. Yes, Scott Paulin, Jasper's voice actor from the beginning, was fired, and fellow Pizza Time Theater voice actor Scott Wilson, who originally voiced Munch and later Chucky, took over Jasper from January to around February or March 1986. And while I do like Scott Wilson, I'm not the biggest fan of his Jasper voice. It sounds too much like the Mad Hatter, almost as if Jasper was returning to his goofy, dim-witted roots.
I just love to sing. I really get a howl.
In April 1986, the show tape History of Rock and Roll was released, and this would be the introduction of the Jasper voice we are most familiar with, and would go on to influence later voices of the character. I'm of course talking about Bob West. Yes, that Bob West, the voice of Barney the Dinosaur himself, did Jasper's voice. CEC was actually his first professional voice acting job. His Jasper voice was notable for being much higher and not derpy sounding. And unlike some of the other Showbiz voices, Bob West got to stick around and become Jasper's official voice actor.
You can be a Yukon dance all hero, having fun when it's under 0 degrees.
Around the late 80s, we finally saw a new Jasper animatronic created. This time it was a full-body Cyberamic, which debuted on the stage we know as the Rocker Stage. He was the exact same bot seen in the portrait and balcony stages, but now he's got legs, and is sitting on a chair on what is supposed to be the front porch of a house. The company actually tried to create a full-body Jasper bot in the early 80s, but it was abandoned, until the introduction of the Rocker Stage in the late 80s. And aside from those few changes, that's pretty much it for Jasper in the Pizza Time Theater era. The costumes, animatronics, and artwork all stayed the same going into the late 80s, into the 90s. But if you're a Chuck E. Cheese fan, you can probably tell where this story is going. Behind the scenes, there was conflict between Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza, and at the end of it, only one brand was left standing, and this would lead to even more changes to both the company and Jasper.
Just the other day, my dad says, "Hey guys, let's..."
He was...
Keep it quilted means you get the best. 3 layers of plush comfort you can see and feel.
It's made to look younger, softer, and more cartoony. Just a lot of that original Droopy Dog Bloodhound look, and his teeth were removed. Personality-wise, he was pretty much the same as he was before the rebrand, but now he was made even smarter than before. Going back to the animatronics, I already kind of talked about the three-stage Jasper, but I didn't really go into specifics. I'm not a big fan of the original three-stage Jasper, and that's mostly due to his very creepy latex mask. Some masks don't look too bad, but most just look downright creepy. Also, you may have noticed that Jasper no longer has a banjo, and that's correct. He now plays an electric guitar. There's actually quite a few different guitars that he played, but I'll save those for another chapter. As for older Pizza Time Theater Cyberamics, they weren't impacted too much, as really the only changes made were the introduction of the cowboy outfit. Also, now all Chuck E. Cheese animatronic stages had televisions, so that the cartoon and costume counterparts could entertain people before or during a performance. Speaking of costumes, 1990 was around the time a brand new Jasper costume was created. It first debuted in show tapes, but would soon be introduced into the restaurants. This Jasper mascot suit was quite similar to the Pizza Time Theater costume, but it is different. For example, the head and muzzle are now much bigger, and he's now wearing this cowboy hat and red bandana. His face is also now a much lighter tannish brown color, and he lost a lot of his wrinkles. Lastly, he's got bigger eyes. His wardrobe was also similar to the previous costume, but now he's just got different overalls with the name on the front pocket, the cow print shirt, and the red sneakers. This costume was designed by the mascot making company, Cowan Costumes, who continues to make CEC mascots even to this day. They also made some of the cosmetics for the animatronics. While the Jasper mascot was used the most in the show tapes, there was another television exclusive version of Jasper used, a puppet. Yep, this is where we get into the puppet era for CEC. And while I'm not really a big fan of some of the 90s puppets, I do really like the Jasper. He's a little unsettling at times, but that could just be because of his kind of rubbery face. I actually like this Jasper's face over the three-stage one, mostly because everything is colored correctly and his head is much wider. While Jasper himself was redesigned everywhere, his voice stayed the exact same as it was before the rebrand. Bob West was still his official voice actor, but now here's where things get a little crazy. You see, throughout the early to mid-90s, Bob West kept getting replaced as the voice of Jasper, but then coming back to voice him shortly after. Jasper went through so many voice actors during this time, and there's a reason for that, which I will mention in a little bit. But for now, here's some of the voice actors to play Jasper throughout the 90s. So starting around 1992, a man named Charles Stewart would be brought on to be only the singing voice for Jasper. Bob West was still going to be the speaking voice. Charles' take on Jasper's voice was similar to Bob West, but he also put his own spin on Jasper, sometimes having Jasper sound deeper and more like the Rockafire Explosion character Duke LaRue, coincidentally also a dog.
When I wake up, I'm excited 'cause a new day's waiting for me.
He would continue to play Jasper until 1993 when Scott Wilson, who played Jasper before in 1986, took over for a year before Bob West came back to voice Jasper until 1994. In January 1994, Duncan Brannon, the longtime voice of Chuck E. Cheese, did Jasper's singing voice throughout the year, while another actor named Reggie Smith did Jasper's speaking voice. Both gave Jasper a much different sounding voice, giving the character a much lower voice and not really country-like.
Dog jamming with my dog buddies and our bark has such a bite. Jasper T-Jow's here, playing guitar, and the super is coolest kind of star.
Then around August 1995, Bob West briefly came back to do Jasper's speaking voice, while Duncan continued doing the singing parts. Reggie Smith would then take over for the rest of 1995. Finally, Bob West came back again for a final time in 1996 and became Jasper's official speaking voice permanently, though Duncan Brandon still did Jasper's singing voice a few times throughout late 1996 and most of 1997. Whew! Man, I'm out of breath from that voice actor timeline. My head's spinning. So now you're probably wondering why Jasper went through so many voice actor changes throughout the 90s. Well, you can blame that on a certain company, the Walt Disney Company. That's right, around 1994, Chuck E. Cheese partnered with Disney to produce all the show tapes. So I'm guessing Disney felt that they needed to replace all the previous CEC voice actors, since it wasn't just Jasper who got several voice changes. Why they tried to do this, I don't know. Maybe they just wanted to freshen things up. Or maybe they couldn't get the original voice actors. But either way, Chuck E. Cheese would continue to work with Disney for a couple more years after. As the 90s went on, Jasper was represented on several items and merchandise. It wasn't as much as it was back in the Pizza Time Theater days, but he did get a few plushies here and there, along with some parody posters and records. I especially like this Indiana Jowls poster, and to my friend Chatty Chucky, here's Jasper as Michael Jackson. One really cool thing to come from the late 90s was this epic-looking Jasper airplane ride. It's similar to that Chuck E. Cheese car ride that takes your photo, but this time it's Jasper in an airplane. It unfortunately doesn't take your photo. I'm not sure which locations had this ride, but I do know a few locations in Chile had them at some point.
Elise, now that we've made so expensive, this golf course is all How'd you get here?
Kayak. They compared hundreds of travel sites to find a great deal on my flight, car, and hotel. Kayak. Search one and done.
The 1990s also brought in some new Jasper Cyberamics. These include the road stages, which featured a half-bodied Jasper like what Pizza Time Theater had, as well as both the 2-stage and 1-stage, featuring a full-bodied Jasper. These Jaspers were pretty much the same as the rocker stage animatronics, but a little more advanced. Also, Jasper got a new mask that no longer features wrinkles, though some locations still did keep the Pizza Time Theater mask. Unfortunately, this would be the last Jasper animatronic figure to ever be created, as by the following year, CEC had something big up their sleeves, something a little more 90s and futuristic. 1997 was a big year for the company, as Chuck E. Cheese's was celebrating its 20th anniversary that year. One of the things that came from this anniversary was a brand new animatronic stage known as the Awesome Adventure Machine. This stage, while being amazing and epic, it only featured one animatronic, that being Chuck E. Cheese himself, in the center. On the right and left sides of the stage, they had two large screens, and that's where the other characters, including Jasper, were seen on. Jasper and the other characters were portrayed by their walk-around counterparts, but there was something different about them. Remember when they used articulated costumes in the early 80s? Well, in the late 90s, they came back. Now, all of the characters in the show tapes featured articulated costumes. These were more advanced than the original ones, and were more accurate to their designs of the characters. However, they didn't really move all that well. Like, Jasper barely moves his mouth, and his eyelids were a whole other story. But on the bright side, he didn't look as creepy as some of the others. Sadly, the Awesome Adventure Machine was never mass-produced due to being too expensive and hard to maintain, so the company instead created another stage, but far less expensive and easier to maintain, Studio C, which also only featured Chucky as an animatronic. There were apparently plans to phase out all of Chucky's friends, including Jasper, to only be replaced by a new character named Bird. This would ultimately never happen, thank God. The articulated costumes remained in the show tapes, but now Studio C had another unique feature not seen on stages with all 5 characters. That's brand new puppets. And guys, this Jasper puppet is my absolute favorite out of all the Jasper puppets. This is the one that I grew up with, and it just looks so accurate to Jasper's cartoon design, even more so than the animatronics. Towards the end of 1998 into 1999 marked the end of an era for Jasper. Well, actually not the character, but his voice. That's right, Bob West officially left the role of Jasper after 12 years, and not long after, Jasper went through another change, though this one, while being subtle, still left a major impact on many CEC fans. Like how the company for 12 years, and not long after, Jasper went through another change, though this one, while being subtle, still left a major impact on many CEC fans.
Pretzel is pretzel flavored, not hot buffalo wing flavored. These Snyder's pieces aren't pretzels.
One of these people brushes Colgate Total Plaque Pro Release. It dissolves it.
Actor Jeremy Blado. Hey, I said his name right. His Jasper voice was nearly identical to Bob West's voice. There's really no difference. It's a spot-on impression.
When you feel down and out, sing a song.
He first started voicing Jasper in early 1999, and one of his first big projects was something that would soon become a cult classic. So around 1999, CEC Entertainment signed a deal with a little-known company at the time called Funimation. Yes, that Funimation. To produce a live-action Chuck E. Cheese movie using the articulated mascot costumes called Chuck E. Cheese and the Galaxy 5000. So in the movie, the articulated Jasper had no changes to his normal appearances, and that includes the bad mouth movements, although sometimes they would use the non-articulated heads. By the way, can I just say that Jasper is probably one of the best parts of this entire movie? Literally anytime he's on screen, I end up cracking up. Not to mention he has one of the best songs in it. In the film, Jeremy Blado reprised his role as Jasper, but there were two people who portrayed Jasper's costume. Those two people being Micah Murnica and Shea Coldwell. So in 1999, Chuck E. Cheese and the Galaxy 5000 was released straight to video and made exclusive to CEC restaurants, as well as other retailers like Toys R Us. It was almost immediately met with mixed to negative reviews, and sort of became forgotten, although it does have its fans, and has gained a cult following. While on the topic of costumes, even though I said the Jasper mascot suits didn't change in the Avenger era, that was a lie, because they were modified quite a bit. Most of the changes occurred with the head, as now the tan parts of his face are now more of a lighter brown color. Also, his eyes are a lot darker for some reason. Another change made was the cow spots on his shirt were made larger. The animatronics, while never really changing, did see one major difference. They finally got rid of that ugly latex Jasper mask in the 2000s and replaced it with a plastic mask. This is the mask everyone's familiar with when it comes to 3-stage Jasper. This mask is really good, and probably one of the best CEC animatronic designs ever made. Unfortunately, the early 2000s would also mark a sad end to a well-known Jasper animatronic, the very first one from the original location in 1977. You see, after Winchester closed, a lot of the animatronics were sent to the CEC corporate offices and put on display. Sadly, the building would flood around the early 2000s, and during the renovation, they threw out the bots and destroyed them. Now, you already know how much I hate how Chuck E. Cheese destroys their animatronics today, but this one infuriates me. It was literally the very first one-of-a-kind Jasper, and you're just gonna throw him out like that? How stupid can you be, CEC? Even if it was water damaged, you don't just throw out a historic artifact. In terms of other miscellaneous things about Avenger Jasper, he did have a few pieces of merchandise, but not much. There was also this really cool looking Jasper Toddler Zone doghouse that was tested at some Texas locations. This Jasper made a few appearances outside the restaurant, but not as many as the Pizza Time Theater Jasper did. He appeared at a couple sports games and several Chuck E. Cheese fan conventions like Cheesevention and ChuckyCon. And while Jasper didn't appear in any commercials, he was animated on a few separate occasions in segments or show tapes. Finally, Jasper made several video game appearances, his most notable being in Chuck E. Cheese's sports games. And if you watched the Game Grumps, you would know why.
I am programmed not to harm anyone. Hello, I am friend dog.
For the next decade or so, Jasper stayed the same and was acting the same as he always had been. Then came 2011, when a strange thing happened involving Jasper. For some reason, from mid to late 2011, Jasper had a noticeably different voice. Jeremy Blado was not the one voicing Jasper. Instead, Robert Gotcher, who previously voiced Jasper in May 1992, took over the role. No one knows why Jeremy didn't voice Jasper during this time. Maybe he was unavailable? Maybe he was sick? Who knows? Robert's Jasper voice was definitely more of a poor impression of Jeremy's, but he conventions like Cheesevention and ChuckyCon. And while Jasper didn't appear in any commercials, he was animated on a few separate occasions in segments or show tapes. Finally, Jasper made several video game appearances, his most notable being in Chuck E. Cheese's sports games. And if you watched the Game Grumps, you would know why.
I am programmed not to harm anyone. Hello, I am friend dog.
For the next decade or so, Jasper stayed the same and was acting the same as he always had been. Then came 2011, when a strange thing happened involving Jasper. For some reason, from mid to late 2011, Jasper had a noticeably different voice. Jeremy Blado was not the one voicing Jasper. Instead, Robert Gotcher, who previously voiced Jasper in May 1992, took over the role. No one knows why Jeremy didn't voice Jasper during this time. Maybe he was unavailable? Maybe he was sick? Who knows? Robert's Jasper voice was definitely more of a poor impression of Jeremy's, but he did sound better when singing. It really gave off those country music vibes. However, by January 2012, Jeremy had returned to voice Jasper, and he continues to be the voice of Jasper to this day. Avenger Jasper would go on to remain in the restaurants for about 15 years before being quietly retired in 2014. But I want to backtrack for a moment, because as many CEC fans know, a few years earlier in 2012, something drastic and controversial happened. Something that would change the company and the characters forever.
I know my gun should be stored locked and loaded. But what good is a gun if it's not prepared for you?
Around mid-2012, CEC Entertainment introduced him, Rockstar Chuck E. Cheese. This was the brand new design of Chuck E. Cheese that would soon be at all locations. Now, the reason I said Rockstar Chuck is controversial is because when he was first introduced, the general public did not like this rodent and wanted nothing to do with him. But CEC didn't care what its customers thought, and Rockstar went ahead and replaced Avenger Chuck in every aspect of the business. Well, everything except for Chucky's friends. Yeah, for For some reason, despite Chucky being redesigned, none of his friends changed their designs. The Avenger designs carried over to the Rockstar era, but that would change pretty soon. Throughout the rest of 2012, we still had Avenger Jasper, but beginning in 2013, we would start to see some changes being made to Jasper and the rest of Chucky's friends. For starters, a brand new puppet would be introduced into the Studio C show tapes, which would soon be phased out and show tapes would soon be standardized for any CEC stage. This Jasper puppet is kinda underwhelming. That's not to say it's a poorly designed puppet, it's just that the original Studio C version looked so much better. Though this look does make him look more Muppet-like. Strangely enough, the Avenger Jasper costumes were still being used in the show tape videos, all the way up until 2014, when the puppets took over. Speaking of 2014, that's when Avenger Jasper was officially retired, and Rockstar Jasper was introduced. Rockstar Jasper saw the biggest change the character received since the 90s. His fur was now light brown with dark brown ears, his snout was also no longer white, and the bloodhound elements were mostly erased from his design, though he is still confirmed to be a hound dog. As for his wardrobe, he still has a red bandana, but he ditched his cowboy hat. His iconic cow print shirt was now gone, and replaced with a blue plaid shirt with red details. He also traded in his overalls for regular blue jeans, with a belt that has a buckle with a J on it. Finally, he now wears cowboy boots, a better change of footwear instead of sneakers. His personality also softened, as he wasn't really much of a wisecracker, but instead he was more loyal and always willing to help out. They also made Jasper do more quote-unquote dog things, like going on a walk or fetching a ball. Oh, did I mention he's CGI now? Even though Jasper got redesigned, he never received a mascot costume based on the new look, and the animatronics didn't get updated clothing. Most locations that had a Jasper costume still continued to use it alongside Rockstar Chuck. The one change that was made to both was the removal of Jasper's cowboy hat. Interestingly, around 2016 or 2017, CEC started using a weird prototype Rockstar Jasper suit. It consisted of the head of Avenger Jasper, but without the hat, but a new clothing design that looks similar to Rockstar Jasper. Thankfully, it wasn't used much, probably because of how cursed it looked, and only showed up at places like the debut of CEC 2.0. Oh wait, I meant the abomination known as CEC 2.0. Also in 2017, we got a new Jasper puppet, which looks a lot better than the last one. This is also one of my favorite CEC puppets. I guess Jasper just really translates well to a puppet. In 2018, we would finally see a brand new Jasper mascot costume created, also created by Cowan Costumes. This Jasper costume ditched the classic head that was used for over 40 years, in favor of a brand new head that's closer to a CG Rockstar look. And yeah, I love it. I honestly like it more than the modern Chucky costume. He just looks so happy and innocent, and everything is proportioned right. Even though I will always like the older Tux/Avenger Jasper costume, for nostalgia reasons, I do enjoy this new Jasper costume. As for other things involving Jasper in the Rockstar era, since we're still in that era, he hasn't really done much, but there's still a lot to talk about. Like how CEC is finally starting to bring the side characters back into the spotlight when it comes to outside the shows. For example, Jasper got new merchandise, like plushies and this god-awful looking figure. Rockstar Jasper has a few video game appearances, like Chuck E. Cheese Racing and Chuck E. Cheese's Party Galaxy. Fun fact about that one, that was actually my first exposure to the Rockstar versions of Chucky's friends. I remember seeing Jasper's design and being very confused. For some reason, he was wearing glasses. Now, I'm not an expert on every piece of CEC lore, but I do not remember Jasper ever wearing glasses. Maybe this was going to be a part of Rockstar Jasper's design, but was scrapped early on? But yeah, it was a weird inclusion. I actually didn't realize that was Jasper until much later. But still, why is he wearing glasses? As for the Jasper costume, while he hasn't appeared in many store locations, he does sometimes get rented out for grand reopenings of store locations. He's also in the annual Chuck E. Cheese Summer Concert Tour. Yeah, that's right, I gotta bring this up. It's cool that Chuck E. Cheese has an official tour now, even though it's just a bunch of rehashed songs. It's still cool to see Chuck E. Cheese characters outside the restaurants again. These first started around 2021 and have been going on since. Jasper's in every show playing his guitar and engaging with the audience. I do hope this concert roadshow continues for the next few years, and Jasper gets to sing another song. Also, CEC Entertainment, please bring this to Kentucky. I probably won't see it in person, but still, us CEC fans in Kentucky need some love. And that brings us to today. As of July 2023, Rockstar Jasper is the current Jasper design used by Chuck E. Cheese. But we aren't quite done just yet with talking about Jasper, as there's still another chapter. In this next chapter, I will be discussing a few Jasper costume variants, as well as animatronic variants, and even some different guitars Jasper used on some stages.
Boring pizza places versus Chuck E. Cheese's. Their pizza, Chuck E.'s pizza. Next time Mom says pizza, remember, Chuck E. Cheese, please. The restaurant where a kid could be a kid.
Real quick, before I talk about variants, I want to mention a few of Jasper's cameos in pop culture outside of CEC. First, Jasper made an appearance at the end of the 2001 movie, Made, where you get to see the two-stage Jasper singing. And that's not all, as the credits of this movie actually featured Jasper's cover of Ace in the Hole. It's pretty funny seeing CEC represented in a hard R-rated movie. Finally, in 2022, Jasper was referenced on an episode of Saturday Night Live, in which Benedict Cumberbatch played a real interesting form of Jasper. Also, I like that Jasper replica in the background. Starting with animatronic variants, I'm going to do general design variations first, and then the guitars next. First up, as we all know, the three-stage Jasper originally had a creepy latex mask before switching to the plastic one. But surprisingly, some locations actually kept the latex mask. For example, the last American location with that mask was in Altoona, Pennsylvania, who removed it in 2012. The last public latex Jasper mask was in the old Guatemala City location, which lasted all the way up until 2016, when the location closed. Interestingly, when the new location in Guatemala opened, they actually put the three-stage animatronics on display, and Jasper's latex mask is still on the animatronic, so it's not entirely gone. I wish more locations would do this with their animatronics.
Imagine if manufacturing automation was simple. Introducing Vention. One platform to design, automate, order.
As for the Cyberanics, some of those Jasper bots actually kept the Pizza Time Theater mask it originally had. An example being our beloved Jasper from Florence, Kentucky, who was sadly removed after the location got 2.0. Now the last Cyberamic Jasper with a Pizza Time Theater mask is the Linwood, Washington location. As for alternative outfits used on Jasper animatronics, it was mainly just shirts that were slightly different from the normal cow print one, but sometimes he would wear a scarf or a bow tie or a Santa hat. Here's the Jasper animatronic from the Eastgate, Cincinnati location, back in the early 2000s. He's kind of creepy. Tucson, Arizona had a unique black and yellow shirt for Jasper. And lastly, here's Jasper as a reindeer. Finally, I can't do a Jasper video without mentioning Matt the Franchise. He's probably the biggest Jasper fan, and he has his own Jasper animatronic, which features a Pizza Time Theater mask, while being full-bodied. It's so cool that he was able to program it to custom dialogue and songs. The last variants to talk about regarding the animatronics is the different guitars Jasper used throughout the years. When concept unification started, Jasper originally was just going to keep the Beach Bear guitar, and most locations stuck with that. but others changed it up a little bit. Here's Pensacola's Jasper with a red guitar. Here's Madison, Wisconsin's Jasper with a blue guitar. Huntsville, Alabama used a red, white, and blue guitar. Mobile, Alabama had a pizza guitar at some point. And finally, here's Jasper's guitar from the Columbus, Georgia location. While most used the Beach Bear guitar, others, like this one from a Phoenix, Arizona location, used a Billy Bob guitar, also from the Rock-afire explosion. Some Jasper bots even reused his Pizza Time Theater banjo, such as in a couple of Massachusetts locations. Finally, in the early to mid-90s, several Jasper animatronics had their banjos and Beach Bear guitars replaced with what is known by many as the Flying Cheese guitar, which is now the standard and most common animatronic Jasper guitar. It too has a variant, this one which is green that Reindeer Jasper had. This was taken at Shiny Happy Danvers. Moving on from the animatronic, now I'm going to mention some walk-around costume alternative outfits. Pizza Time Theater Jasper had too many to name off, since pretty much every one of those costumes has unique clothing. But one I actually want to mention is the original Jasper animatronic. I know I said I was done with the animatronics, but I forgot about this one, and it's still noteworthy to bring up. For some reason, after the portrait bots from Winchester were moved to the corporate HQ, they put Jasper in this weird blue Where's Waldo shirt. Not sure why they did this. I don't know if something happened to his normal outfit, but it's unclear as to why they put this shirt on him. As for actual alternative costumes for the Jasper mascot suit, he doesn't have too many, but there's still some worth mentioning. Firstly, here's Jasper in a red plaid shirt. Here he is dressed as some sort of party clown, I think. And here he is in a colorful plaid shirt. Here's the outfit he wore in a lot of show tapes from the 2000s. It features Jasper in jeans and a jean jacket. Not sure if it was ever used in any locations, but I think it was just a show tape exclusive. Speaking of show tapes, here's Jasper in a bowling outfit from the CEC cover of Justin Bieber's song Baby. I'm not going to talk about every show tape exclusive outfit, or else we'd be here all day. I just wanted to bring this up because, well, I like it, and I like bowling. Here's an outfit Jasper wore at Chucky Con 2019. It's similar to his jean jacket look, but now he's got a black jacket instead. Second to last outfit is this late 90s, early 2000s outfit. This is the outfit that I think Paducah, Kentucky's Jasper mascot had. Unfortunately, he was thrown away and destroyed in 2018 during their 2.0 remodel. And finally, here's one of the most cursed things I've ever seen in my entire life, Jasper's head on Pasquale's body. I don't have any words for this abomination, so let's move on. And finally, the last thing I want to bring up regarding Jasper is this guy. I've seen a lot of people mistake this guy for Jasper, or think it's a prototype Jasper costume. But I'm here to break it to y'all, but this dog ain't Jasper. This is Barnaby Beach Dog, the mascot of Australian Family Fun Center, named Grundy's, which, fun fact, actually housed a Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater in the early 80s. Actually, it was called Charlie Cheese's Pizza Playhouse due to cultural reasons. And while this guy was around at the same time, he's not Jasper. Yes, he looks like Jasper, and might even be the same dog breed, but it ain't our beloved fruitcake dog. Although there is this. Is this one actually Jasper? It certainly looks like him. Although I saw this artwork in the background of a photo, that looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? Is Barnaby Beach Dog a ripoff of Jasper T. Jowls? It's starting to look like it. But on that note, this officially concludes the history and evolution of Jasper, Tennessee Jowls.
Do you own your home in Oklahoma but still rent your electricity? If you pay more than $70 a month,
Did somebody say cheese?
place where a kid can be a kid has been a part of nearly everyone's childhood, including me. This popular pizza chain is best known for many things, like pizza and arcade games. But the one thing that Chuck E. Cheese's is known for is for their mascot, a character whose name is Chuck E. Cheese. This larger-than-life rodent has been seen throughout every restaurant, either as an animatronic, a walk-around costume character,
Call it Chuck E.
manufacturers, there are also booths set up by different mascot costume making companies in case somebody wants to purchase a suit from them to use in their attraction. And one of the costume companies caught Bushnell's attention. So at this mascot booth, he saw what he thought was a costume of a coyote. So he purchased the costume and began theming the restaurant solely based on this costume. The original restaurant name was Coyote Pizza. After the costume was shipped to Atari, Bushnell was hoping to give the costume the ability to talk, most likely through some sort of mechanism, and he gave the costume to his crew so they could look at it. However, Bushnell and his team soon realized that this coyote costume purchased had a long pink tail, and was in fact not a coyote, but rather a rat. But rather than going out and buying an actual coyote mascot costume, Bushnell decided to stick with the rat and rebranded the restaurant idea to Rick Rat's Pizza. And the rat was given the name Ricky Rat, which was chosen because it would create competition with Disney and their character, Mickey Mouse. The costume itself was very different compared to Chuck as we know him today. The costume has a lot of shaggy gray fur and very pointed ears, and was also extremely fat with a pink belly and weird feet. Around this time, the Ricky Rat character was used as the unofficial mascot of Atari, where he was seen promoting the newest games. Also, on a side note, this particular rat mascot character was also used by Casa Bonita, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, which is a dinner and show kind of restaurant, and it's often described as the Disneyland of Mexican restaurants. The Rick Rat name didn't last long though, as they soon realized it wouldn't be a good idea to have the word rat in a restaurant environment, not to mention what it would do to the health inspectors. So they decided to drop the name, but the character was still going to be a rat, so they had to find a new name that would work for this rat. Enter Gene Landrum, Atari's consumer division president, who had also been made the general manager of the restaurant operating division. He came up with a new name for the restaurant, this name being The Big Cheese, a name for both the mascot and the restaurant. Everyone seemed to like the idea, but there was one problem. The name Big Cheese was already trademarked by Marathi? I don't know how to pronounce that. Though the trademark was about to expire, they still wanted an original name. So after a little help from Atari's legal department, everybody finally settled on a name for this rat and his restaurant. What name did they choose? Well, of course, they chose Chuck E. Cheese. The name was chosen mostly because it was a 3-smile name, meaning just saying it would make you smile. Try it. Say Chuck E. Cheese without smiling. They also chose the name because it was still a jab at Mickey Mouse from Disney. Speaking of Disney, Bushnell was also trying to find entertainment for the restaurant, so that it was more than just pizza and arcade games. He then thought of how much he wanted to work at Disney, and came up with a grand idea. But more on that in the next section. for the restaurant, along with an animated Chucky plastered on it. This artwork would go on to be used throughout the 70s and 80s, and it would also be used on tokens and tickets, along with newspaper articles. Harold Gold Branson was also contacted by Bushnell because he wanted him to create something else. Remember when I mentioned Disney when Bushnell was looking for entertainment in the restaurant? Well, he found it. Animatronics. That's right, Nolan Bushnell came up with the idea of animatronics for the entertainment, once again taking inspiration from Disney. So Gold Branson and his team worked on the many animatronic characters for the restaurant. The Chuck animatronic was very different compared to the mascot, where he had a realistic look to him, along with a unibrow, a microphone, and even a cigarette. Remember, folks, two things. One, this was the 70s, and two, the animatronics were actually created for the adults, not the kids. Here's a fun fact. So while Harold Gold Branson is mostly credited with creating the animatronics and mascot, there are two other guys responsible for these creations as well, and their names are Sid and Marty Krofft. That's right, Sid and Marty Krofft, the guys behind HR Pufnstuf, the Banana Splits, and the animatronics for the Tales of the Okefenokee Dark Ride, created the Chuck E. Cheese characters. Though nobody has mentioned it, I didn't even know about it until Sid Krofft talked about it on his Instagram. Here's another fun fact. The animatronic Chuck and the mascot Chuck have the same exact snout mold, both of which are made from latex. So with the mascot, animatronics, and logo created, Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater was ready for its grand opening on May 17, 1977. So let's talk more about Chuck himself, shall we? So in the beginning, Chuck E. Cheese was still very much a rat, and he even acted like one too. He constantly bullied his friends and called them names like nitwit. That's why the animatronic shows were actually for the adults, due to it having things kids wouldn't understand. Nothing too bad. Think Toy Story or even Shrek. Though this version of Chuck was toned down as the years went on, and he even gave up smoking in 1980 when they held a big campaign. Despite his rat-like personality, everybody grew to love him. And I mean everybody grew to love him. As the 1980s rolled in, Pizza Time Theater was having trouble keeping Chuck's mascot costume consistent with each location. This was due to materials that were around at the time. And depending on your location, Chuck had a different brown vest design. So beginning in May 1981, Chuck got a brand new mascot design with new yellow and orange checkered vest, bright colors, and rounded features, like the ears. He also had red rosy cheeks added. His vest also included a place where his long pink rat tail could be placed so kids wouldn't step on it or pull it. Fun fact, the new vests were silk screen printed so it ensured that every vest was the exact same. The animatronics also received redesigns with a less realistic approach and simpler movements. They were also bigger and bulkier. Speaking of the animatronic, I found this obscure Chuck E. Cheese mascot costume from the late 70s, early 80s, which had a head similar to the animatronic. I can only find a single picture of this, and there's no information on it. Can anybody in the comments section please help me out? Do you know anything about this thing? The logo changed this time, including a new Chucky and different font with simpler colors. Also beginning in the 1980s, Pizza Time Theater started producing commercials to promote their restaurants. And while at first the commercials were very simple, the company realized that they needed to have Chuck in the commercials. So Chuck began to show up in more commercials, but they used the normal mascot costume. And so Pizza Time Theater once again went back to the drawing board. While brainstorming how Chuck can have a bigger presence in the commercials, somebody remembered the original idea Nolan Bushnell had with the original rat costume. The idea being that the rat mascot would be able to talk. So the advertising team decided to revive the idea of a talking Chuck in the commercials, and this time, it succeeded.
When my mom asked me where to go for my birthday.
And in the restaurants, the company was going through some changes, and felt like it was time for Chuck to change a little bit. And so he did. Pizza Time Theater was continuing its success by opening more and more stores and marketing their brand. But there's one thing going on that nobody outside the company knew about. You see, Nolan Bushnell had recently opened an animation studio called Cadaveroscope, and someone had the idea to create a Chuck E. Cheese themed Christmas special called The Christmas That Almost Wasn't. In fact, a lot of ads in newspapers and magazines began promoting Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater with a new Chuck design that was taken from this special. The special was going to be aired on NBC during Christmas 1983, but something happened that would kill this project: the infamous video game crash of 1983. Since the crash caused a huge effect on Pizza Time Theater, the special was canceled and never released, though all the voice work and music was done, and this eventually led to a big change with Chuck himself. In the special, John Weidlock reprised his role as Chucky, but during the recording session, Bushnell and the engineers were displeased with Weidlock's inability to sing, so they went to find a different voice actor that would be able to provide the singing voice for Chuck. The company eventually chose fellow Pizza Time Theater voice actor Scott Wilson, who at the time was the voice of the character Mr. Munch, to provide only Chuck's singing voice in the special. However, when Wilson sang the special's final song, on his first take by the way, the company decided to make him the new voice of Chucky on the spot.
Now you can have one of these Chuck E. t-shirts for your very own for only $2.99. And I'll give you a coupon for tokens worth $3 on your next visit.
Around this time, Chuck's released.
Give you a coupon for tokens worth $3.
Since the crash caused a huge effect on Pizza Time Theater, the special was canceled and never released, though all the voice work and music was done, and this eventually led to a big change with Chuck himself. In the special, John Weidlock reprised his role as Chucky, but during the recording session, Bushnell and the engineers were displeased with Weidlock's inability to sing, so they went to find a different voice actor that would be able to provide the singing voice for Chuck. The company eventually chose fellow Pizza Time Theater voice actor Scott Wilson, who at the time was the voice of the character Mr. Munch, to provide only Chuck's singing voice in the special. However, when Wilson sang the special's final song, on his first take by the way, the company decided to make him the new voice of Chucky on the spot.
Now you can have one of these
Beginning around 1986, they merged into Showbiz Pizza Time Inc. The two restaurants began to cross over with each other, meaning Chuck E. Cheese would appear in Showbiz Pizza Place restaurants, and the Showbiz Pizza characters, Billy Bob the Bear and the Rockafire Explosion animatronic band, would appear at Chuck E. Cheese restaurants. It really depends on the location. Here's something weird. So in 1986, during the merger, they were still producing separate shows, and there was this one show produced where Chuck had a very different voice.
You know, Chuck Berry has given us so many rock and roll classics, it's hard to choose which one is best.
Voice here, but a lot of people were confused and didn't like it. But it was only used in this show before the company switched back to Scott Wilson. Wonder why they did this. Did they think it would be a better voice? I'm not sure. As for the Chuck mascot costume used, it was basically the same as it had been since 1981, except in late 82 or in 83, Chuck was given a plain red vest to match his derby hat, and he received new ears that kind of look like round funnels, if you ask me. And his eyes weren't that creepy. For the most part, though. It also seems Chuck's derby hat could be removed, since I found photos of this costume without its hat. Sometimes he would wear a different hat, like a Santa hat, or even a hat that the employees wore at the time. Also around this time, the company started to push Chuck out for more than just the restaurant. He began showing up at events outside the restaurants, such as at elementary schools, the zoo, or even at your local grocery store. It depended on the event. Here's something cool. So as you may know, many YouTubers and Chuck E. Cheese fans out there have been able to purchase Chuck E. Cheese costumes off sites like eBay. Not sure how, but they do. Anyway, there's a YouTube channel called Cisco and Poncho's World of Adventure, and they actually have an original early to mid-80s Chuck E. Cheese costume. I'm not sure where they bought it, but I believe they got it from eBay. They've made several videos on this costume, and they even gave some cool behind-the-scenes facts, like how the costume was mostly stored in a dark, cramped closet, and how the original mascot heads were made of fiberglass and had a small chin strap inside. It also seems as if different locations have had different costumes, as I found photos and some video of this Chucky costume, and they're all from different locations, and yet they all look different. For example, some costumes have rosy cheeks, and others didn't. Some had flat eyes, some had thicker eyes. And a weird change was some costumes didn't even have a tail. This was mostly done because of, yet again, kids were messing with it. The company also started to redesign the animatronics by making full-bodied versions, though most locations kept the half-bodied versions. Some of them even still have the half-body versions to this day. So Chuck stayed like this all the way up until the late 80s. But before we move on to the next section, I want to mention two unique costumes. So I have no clue where this photo was taken, but it shows a very different Chucky costume used at an unknown location. This is the only photo of this costume, and there's no video. Now this costume is believed to be a prototype of the next costume we will look at, and features more plush designs, and a long pointy snout with whiskers. His head overall kind of looks like an elephant, but the vest is cool. It has a sparkly red, white, and blue design with a blue bow tie and gold undershirt. If anybody has information on this costume, please let me know, as I'd love to know more about it. The second costume shown here is actually a prototype of the next costume. It looks pretty good, and kind of gives off early Avenger Chuck vibes, though this was long before Avenger Chuck was even considered. I really love this design, as it looks like a plush Chuck blown up, and I'm kind of sad this one didn't stick around, but this next one did.
Where can a kid get around?
Got redesigned once again, but this time
Where can a kid get around? Where can he act?
remember him too. However, I noticed that despite a new mascot suit being made, some restaurants still use the old 1983 suit, like in this video, or in these photos. But there's one big change that occurred, and I'm not talking about the mascot. In 1990, Showbiz Pizza Time Inc., the parent company of both Chuck E. Cheese's and Showbiz Pizza Place, decided to revamp and convert all Showbiz Pizza Places into Chuck E. Cheese's. This controversial move was called Concept Unification. Concept unification meant that all previous Showbiz Pizza artifacts, including the Rockafire Explosion animatronic band, would be recycled, or in some cases, destroyed, and replaced with the Chuck E. Cheese band and characters. For example, the Rockafire character Rolf the Wolf was repurposed into Chuck E. Cheese himself with different cosmetics. You can watch Concept Unification on YouTube, but I will warn you, they will make you cry if you're a Showbiz kid. And I didn't even grow up in the 80s, and it still made me cry the first time I saw it. Around this time, Chuck E. Cheese ditched his red vest and debuted a new, slick, black tuxedo look, which was seen on both the animatronic and mascot. This is actually the first time Chucky was given pants, meaning his tail would be eliminated. Despite all these changes, he still kept the red derby hat, though some costumes featured a black derby hat. Fancy. The head didn't feature a neck though, and the performer's neck could easily be seen. The company also created a new version of Chuck that was different from the rest. A puppet. That's right. For the show tapes made for the animatronic shows, they would often use either the mascots or new puppet versions of the characters. And let me just say, I love this Chucky puppet. it looks just like him. Despite all these changes made to the mascot and animatronic, the company faced another problem. You see, in the 90s, Chuck E. Cheese began to have competition with other family entertainment centers, such as the recently opened Discovery Zone and even McDonald's. These places had giant play places and other physical activities that got kids up and running, and so Chuck E. Cheese's wanted to do the same. The first thing they did was make Chuck E. Cheese hipper and more cool. So what did they do? They placed Chuck in a yellow long-sleeve shirt and red shorts, along with red sneakers, and also made merchandise and artwork of him doing sports. However, they still kept the derby and the bow tie, so it looked a little off and made for a weird combination. That look stuck till around 1993, when the company went back to the drawing board. Now, when I said that Chuck got a new outfit, I didn't say he lost his tuxedo, because he never did. He actually kept his tuxedo look throughout the 90s, and even into the 2000s. Now, they did decide to redesign Chuck again, and this one might look familiar.
Some things just aren't made for kids. Like gold. Or fancy red.
A little off and made for a weird combination. That look stuck till around 1993, when the company went back to the drawing board. Now, when I said that Chuck got a new outfit, I didn't say he lost his tuxedo, because he never did. He actually kept his tuxedo look throughout the 90s, and even into the 2000s. Now, they did decide to redesign Chuck again, and this one might look familiar.
Some things just aren't made for kids. Well timed again. Well done.
So in or around 1993, Chuck E. Cheese received a somewhat major redesign, mostly in the face, but a little bit with the rest too. He was given a more rounded and softer look in the head, with a less pointy snout, bigger eyes, and smaller ears. He actually resembles the logo even more, which is more than what I could say about the animatronic. Yikes. He was also made a lot larger with an improved tuxedo, though he occasionally still wore the yellow sports shirt. He also occasionally wore these really cool shoes. This Chuck just gives off a friendlier appeal, which is what the company wanted. Chuck was given a brand new voice actor due to all the changes made, meaning Scott Wilson, Chuck's voice actor since 1983, was replaced. So who was the new voice of Chuck? None other than Duncan Brandon. Chuck E. Cheese was actually Duncan's first voiceover job. Now, at first, Duncan based his Chucky voice off of Scott Wilson's voice, still giving Chuck that iconic New Jersey accent, and still keeping the same style as Wilson. But over time, he began to make the character more of his own.
Hello there, everybody. Welcome to the party. We're gonna have some big times together. What do you say we get your friends together with my... Come on!
Around 1994, the company was still not done changing Chucky, as they were still trying to reach a younger and more active generation. So they decided to get rid of Chuck's iconic derby hat and replace it with a red baseball cap. And they switched out his tuxedo with a red long-sleeve shirt with yellow parts, blue pants, and a whistle. But he did still have his red bow tie. He also had many, many outfits created for him over the years, but more on that later. Now, despite this Chuck being used in commercials, it seems Derby Hat Chuck was still being used in the actual restaurants, as well as the show tapes made for the live shows. He even became the new logo with the iconic thumbs up, or as I call it, thumbs to the forehead design, with the colors of Cool Chuck, which is what they call this version of Chucky. Though I do not know if this was actually used in any of the restaurants or if it was used exclusive to marketing. Now here's something both cool and interesting that occurred. So remember in 1982 when Pizza Time Theater created an articulated Chuck for the commercials? Well, around 1995 or 1996, the company tried it again, but this time it wasn't just Chucky, as all of his friends got articulated heads. However, these articulated heads had very limited movement in their mouths. Their eyes were okay, but those mouth movements were bad. The costume heads were also extremely heavy. Duncan Brandon was quoted as saying, "It felt like wearing a bomb on your head." The heads also malfunctioned a lot and made the characters look really derpy. Now if that doesn't scream FNAF, I don't know what does. Here's a random fun fact. The Chuck E. Cheese show tapes were actually produced by none other than Disney. That's right, Chuck E. Cheese worked with Disney in the 1990s. Movements were bad. The costume heads were also extremely heavy. Duncan Brandon was quoted as saying, "It felt like wearing a bomb on your head." The heads also malfunctioned a lot and made the characters look really derpy. Now if that doesn't scream FNAF, I don't know what does. Here's a random fun fact. The Chuck E. Cheese show tapes were actually produced by none other than Disney. That's right, Chuck E. Cheese worked with Disney in the 1990s.
Hey, that's funny. My door isn't open. It's almost like something was holding it shut. Do you kids out there see anything holding my door shut? Oh, that's better. Hi there, everyone.
That's right. In 1997, an all-new animatronic show was being worked on and tested called The Awesome Adventure Machine. This stage was made to appeal to the kids of the 90s and contained a single bot of Chucky, eliminating all the other characters and only featuring them on the two large TVs on each side of the animatronic. For this stage, Chuck was given a brand new sporty yellow, pink, and blue outfit, complete with a hat, elbow pads, and a shirt with Chuck E. Cheese written on the front. This costume was also made for the walk-around costume, but I can't find any photos of it actually being in the restaurant, and it seems to have only been used in marketing. Sadly, this concept didn't actually get greenlit, despite getting positive reviews from the only location where it was installed. This probably had something to do with it being a technician's nightmare to repair it if it broke. Thankfully, this concept did not go to waste.
That make the fun at Chuck E. Cheese even cooler. Share it with your classmates.
Eliminating all the other characters and only featuring them on the two large TVs on each side of the animatronic. For this stage, Chuck was given a brand new sporty yellow, pink, and blue outfit, complete with a hat, elbow pads, and a shirt with Chuck E. Cheese written on the front. This costume was also made for the walk-around costume, but I can't find any photos of it actually being in the restaurant, and it seems to have only been used in marketing. Sadly, this concept didn't actually get greenlit, despite getting positive reviews from the only location where it was installed. This probably had something to do with it being a technician's nightmare to repair it if it broke. Thankfully, this concept did not go to waste.
That make the fun at Chuck E. Cheese even cooler.
Occurred. The Studio C stages at first had unique show tapes with puppet versions of the other characters, though a Chuck E. Cheese puppet was seen occasionally. Honestly, as much as I love this version of Chucky, I'm not that big It kind of looks like a bear, not a rat. Here's another random thing that occurred. So remember how in 1986 there was this weird show tapes that featured a completely different Chucky voice? Well, it happened again, but we actually know who it was. It was none other than Jeremy Blando. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, dude. He's the current voice of the Chuck E. Cheese character Jasper T. Jowls. Now, this voice he did didn't sound that bad, but it still put some people off. Jeremy even said at ChuckyCon 2019 that he has no memory of voicing Chuck.
Oh yeah, it's time for interactive diagnostics. If my lips ain't moving, it ain't working. All right.
While Cool Chuck continued to be present in the restaurants and Avenger Chuck in the commercials, behind the scenes, two things happened. First, the logo was changed and gave Chucky a yellow shirt, similar to his old sports shirt from 1992. Second, CEC Entertainment had signed a deal with a little company unknown at the time called Funimation to produce a live-action Chuck E. Cheese movie using the articulated mascot costumes. In the movie, the articulated mascots had little to no changes from their normal appearances, and that includes the bad mouth movements. Chuck had an outfit similar to his original Cool Chuck outfit, but the highlight was his new racing outfit he wore throughout the film. Now, I'll talk about variant costumes later, but let me just say, this costume is something. Also, I've noticed in the film there are instances where they used the non-articulated heads, which is kind of strange, especially at the end. In the film, Duncan Brandon reprised his role as Chucky, but there were two people who portrayed Chuck's costume, those two people being Peyton Welch and Daphne Jur. So in 1999, Chuck E. Cheese in the Galaxy 5000 was released straight to video and made exclusive to Chuck E. Cheese restaurants as well as other retailers such as Toys R Us. It was almost immediately met with mixed to negative reviews and sort of became forgotten. Although it does have its fans.
It's adventure!
By 2001, Avenger Chucky started to be introduced in the restaurants as the walk-around costume, though Cool Chuck was still used at most of the locations. Cool Chuck even made a cameo at the end of the 2001 movie, Made, starring Jon Favreau. Now, I've noticed there are several key differences with Chuck in the commercials and Chuck in the stores. In the commercials, Chuck wore short sleeves, black skater gloves, and white sneakers, and had a backwards hat, while the mascot costume didn't have skater gloves, and he had long sleeves. Though this probably had something to do with the costume itself, as short-sleeved shirts proved to look a little weird. He also had different shoes than the ones he had in the commercial. Now, he did have those shoes, but he normally wore these awesome green shoes. This is what he's best known by, but he also has been known to wear these shoes as well. The costume heads were also changed to a lighter material, being plastic with a better helmet inside. So Cool Chuck was replaced with Avenger Chuck as the mascot costume starting in 2001, but he was still the logo until 2004, when the now iconic thumbs-up Avenger Chuck took over, though most locations kept the Cool Chuck logo even to this day. Also in 2004, that's when Avenger Chuck was officially put into the restaurants nationwide, replacing Cool Chuck altogether. Here's something interesting. There are actually two versions of the logo. One with Chucky sporting red on his hat, and another where it's just the normal colors. I also found this version where he's trying to resemble the previous Cool Chuck pose. The animatronic Chucks also received Avenger outfits by 2004, and even to this day, some locations still have their Chucky bot with Avenger clothing. So Avenger Chuck was used for an extremely long time and undoubtedly had the biggest impact on the company, and is the design of Chuck that the general public is familiar with. The mascot costume even made its way back to the TV commercials. Well, only one from around 2008, but he started making cameos in other media where Chuck E. Cheese's was referenced. Some notable examples include Family Guy, American Dad, Gravity Falls, Back at the Barnyard, and most notably the sitcom show, Yes Dear, when one of the characters' brother was chased while wearing the Avenger Chuck costume. There's probably more out there, but these are just a couple of examples. Also beginning in the late 2000s or early 2010s, the mascot costume was updated with a weird change. Can you find it? Yeah, they got rid of his tooth. And it's not like the tooth fell off the costume. It's a new molded head without teeth. This was showing the direction the company was wanting to go with the character. Thankfully, people didn't mind this, and the Chuck with teeth was still around at basically every store. But sadly, all good things must come to an end, and Avenger Chuck was officially retired in mid-2012. However, the general public was unaware of it until something happened. Costume was updated with a weird change. Can you find it? Yeah, they got rid of his tooth. And it's not like the tooth fell off the costume. It's a new molded head without teeth. This was showing the direction the company was wanting to go with the character. Thankfully, people didn't mind this, and the Chuck with teeth was still around at basically every store. But sadly, all good things must come to an end, and Avenger Chuck was officially retired in mid-2012. However, the general public was unaware of it until something happened. FX, who created films like The Book of Life and Freebirds, with the latter of the two having Chuck E. Cheese product placement and promotions in the restaurants. As for his voice, Chucky was given a new voice actor in the form of Jared Reddick, the lead singer of the band Bowling for Soup, who had done previous voice work in the past, such as performing the theme song for the Disney Channel show Phineas and Ferb.
There's 104 days of summer vacation, and school comes along just to end it. So the annual problem for our
He was also shrunk down in size from being taller or about the same size as the kids in the commercials to being the size of an actual rat. Oh wait, they actually made him a mouse now. Well, I'm still gonna call him a rat. A new puppet design was also created, and at first it looked a little weird, but over time and a new puppet was designed, it looks fantastic. This is one of the only good things I like about Rockstar Chuck. The company also started using the puppets for show tapes instead of the mascots. Another thing that's good about Rockstar is we finally know the origin story of Chucky, and it's kind of horrifying. So Chuck E. Cheese is an orphan who lived in an orphanage and didn't know his birthday. That's why he celebrates other people's birthdays. He then won a Pong tournament and got $50 and bought a ticket to New York. However, he was homeless until he wound up in Pasquale's kitchen. Not knowing what to do, Chuck began to sing, and Pasquale realized that a singing mouse would save his business. And the rest is history. Despite all these changes made, there was a lot of heavy outcry by fans, the general public, and even some restaurant locations refused to use the new Rockstar costume, as they chose to stick with Avenger Chuck as their main mascot costume. This also applies to the animatronics, as most kept the Avenger outfit, though nowadays most have updated their robots to have the Rockstar costume. And they also added the mascot suit into every single restaurant, replacing Avenger Chuck altogether by 2014. There was even controversy with Duncan Brandon, as he was never informed that he was being replaced, and so contacted the company and made a farewell letter to the Chuck E. Cheese fans. This news broke out of CEC and made it to local news stations like CNN. Chuck E. Cheese is of course denied everything, saying Duncan is still under contract to provide entertainment for Chuck E. Cheese's, but I highly doubt that. Although Duncan has said that he has nothing against the company and would 100% work with Chuck E. Cheese's again. I mean, after all, Chuck was his first voice acting job. Now, at first the logo stayed the same, but the company slowly started putting Rockstar Chuck on the logo. This all changed in 2017 when IT was created. IT created a new logo and completely rebranded the company as just Chuck E. Cheese Pizzeria and Games. Now, this logo is trash. It looks like it was done by a 5-year-old, but that's a whole other video. Nevertheless, Rockstar Chuck is still being used at the time of this video, and probably will be for the next decade or so, if the company is still around by then. I doubt the costumes will, since they're constantly falling apart. I mean, look at this video, his nose literally fell off. So this concludes the history of the Chuck E. Cheese character. But before we leave, I want to highlight all the variant costumes Chuck E. Cheese has worn over the years. So Chuck E. Cheese has been known to wear more than what he's depicted to wear in marketing. Some of these look great, others not so much. Here are a few costumes of Chuck over the years. Note, I'm not covering costumes exclusive to Chuck E. Cheese music videos, as that would make this video like 3 hours long, and I do not want to go through all those videos. I'm also not covering fan outfits. Now, back in the Pizza Time Theater days, Chuck really didn't wear variants, as he mostly stuck to his brown vest and derby hat. Though it's safe to say he probably had some, maybe a Santa hat, but by the early 80s, that's when Chuck got lots of variants. Here's a picture of Chuck wearing a captain's outfit at a convention. Here he is at a baseball game in Oakland, wearing a jersey. As for the mid to late 80s, here's a picture of Chuck dressed as Dracula. This costume is called Count Chuckula, not to be confused with the breakfast cereal Count Chocula. Here's a picture of him wearing what kind of looks like a Dick Tracy or Sherlock Holmes outfit. I can't really tell since the photo's in pretty bad quality. Here's Chuck dressed as some sort of magician since he has a red and black cape, and what might be some sort of wand. I don't know, it could be a walking stick though. Finally, here's some photos of Chuck wearing a Santa hat in 1991. These were actually taken at the St. Matthews Louisville location. Not creepy at all. Definitely not creepy. Moving on to the Tux/Cool Chuck/Avenger Chuck era, here's where variant costumes hit their peak. First off, here's Chuck wearing a basketball jersey, and he's at some sort of grocery store, and then here's one where he's at a massage place. Here's an outfit many of you would be familiar with. I remember this outfit from the Chuck E. Cheese University training video from 2007. Here's Chuck wearing an outfit with US on the front. Not sure what that means. I mean, I know what US means, but I don't know why he's wearing it. Here's a cool costume. It's Wizard Chuck. Now, to my knowledge, this was never used at any locations, but rather at a Chuck E. Cheese's general manager convention that took place in Las Vegas in 2001. Here's an alternative outfit for Cool Chuck, with a purple and red shirt. Nothing too special here. Oh, here's a nice one. This outfit is referred to as Duncan, obviously named after Duncan Brandon. It's composed of a red and green shirt and orange pants. Chuck actually wore this the last time I was there. Here's a soccer outfit that Chuck wore. Again, nothing too special. Here's Avenger Chuck, but he's wearing a superhero outfit. This look is called Super Chucky. For Halloween, Chuck can be seen wearing this kind of epic karate outfit. And for Christmas, he gets a full Santa suit. Now, I've already mentioned these two, but I'll do it again. Here's the awesome Adventure Machine outfit that I'm pretty sure was exclusive to the commercials. And last but certainly not least, the Galaxy 5000 racing outfit. A one-on-one item made exclusively for the film. I'm not actually sure if it was used in any of the restaurants. Probably not, though. As for Rockstar Chucky, he really doesn't have much. The most I've seen is this pirate costume for Halloween, a Santa hat and scarf for Christmas, sometimes a full Santa suit, and this random outfit I saw on Facebook. But other than that, nothing too special. Oh, I just remembered another one. He's wearing a birthday hat to celebrate Chuck E. Cheese's 40th anniversary in 2017. Alright, so literally while I was recording this, I found this Chuck wearing a David S. Pumpkins outfit for Halloween. This is hilarious. This concludes a look back on Chuck E. Cheese mascot costume variants. there you have it, a history of every single Chuck E. Cheese mascot. Nevertheless, Rockstar Chuck is still being used at the time of this video.
What's up, guys? I am Ava Kolker, a Sony audio.